Okay, welcome back. So the arms race lesson 2. Now, the arms race has changed the Cold War forever. At every moment now that we go through, that we enter, we have the threat of nuclear war. We're using that policy of brinkmanship to really push these events to the edge, okay? And we've reached second strike capability, which means the whole world is potentially threatened. The race as a whole, as we went through yesterday, is arguably won by the USA, as the USSR is inevitably bankrupted by it. This is opposite. This is unlike the space race, where the USA is less dominant and the USSR were the ones reaching those milestones first. So the arms race is more dominated by the USA. They put far greater funds, they have far greater funds to put into it, and they're the ones reaching those milestones first. For example, the atom bomb, the hydrogen bomb, the long-range bomber, the B-52. And eventually they kind of force the USSR into negotiations because they just can't keep up financially. Now that's what we did yesterday, and today we're going to have a look at the reaction to this all over the world, not just in America, not just in the USSR, but what did popular opinion do as a reaction to this kind of fear and paranoia that was spreading over the world? Okay, so the threat of nuclear war is very, very real in the minds of ordinary people, and the government, as a reaction to that, have to try and reassure people that we have a plan in place to survive this in case it happens. One of those things that happened was that the USA created a duck and cover campaign. They would do drills in schools. So in schools, you would practice at how to duck and cover yourself. And in 1951, they produced lots of kind of adverts and film reels showing how to deal with this and how to follow the duck and cover policy. One of these campaigns uses Bert the turtle. He's just there. And in this video, he kind of hides in his shell and he shows you and he shows young children how they should be ducking and covering themselves to deal with a nuclear bomb. Now, as we probably can logically work out, if a nuclear bomb was to hit America, ducking and covering like Bert the turtle probably wasn't going to help very much, but it at least put people's minds at ease that there was some kind of hope here. Similarly, England had a very similar program. In England, it was called the Protect and Survive program. Now, this kind of came into force really in the 1970s, and the government issued this booklet here detailing how to protect and survive a nuclear attack. Now, the purpose of the advice was to reassure people, and the government produced pamphlets, radio broadcasts, and short films to try and reassure the public that there was a plan in place. 500,000 of these booklets were produced and distributed, and I don't think the government really expected the kind of reaction they had to this campaign. People were absolutely adamant in terms of making sure they took this information in, understood it, and could then use it. The Home Office and the BBC produced a radio script broadcasting what to do. Again, as we know, in reality, it wouldn't really have helped. And another thing that was going on is that at the same time, underground shelters were built for the government to hide in if a nuclear attack happened, so that government could continue running, and there were contingency plans put in place in case key members of the government were killed. So it just shows us how very real this threat was at the time and how people took it extremely seriously. Okay, as normally happens when, I guess, dangerous things are going on in government, popular reaction, public start to get involved. And there was a campaign that was developed into the 1950s, but came into kind of full force a bit later on, called the Ban the Bomb campaign. And if I just move out of the way of the English version of these flags, ban the bomb, okay? And it was just a group of people who kind of came together and said, we have to get rid of this. It's causing too much fear and paranoia in daily life. And what's the point of us all funneling all of this money into these things, which just cause destruction? People are questioning whether these bombs are morally right. And as you can see from the photograph I've got behind me, it was something which was going on in lots of different countries. We've got lots of different languages, lots of different nations are seeing groups of people starting to reflect on whether this really is the right way to go. Ban the Bomb kind of became very, very public in February 1958, and I'm going to show you what happened on that date in London. So in February of 1958, a group of 5,000 people came together for a rally. And it was, you know, people gathered to hear speeches condemning the bomb, and they marched on Westminster. And this was kind of the first real moment where the public came together and very publicly, you know, showed their distaste and their resentment at this use of government money, but also at this very real threat that people lived in at the time. Now, this public pressure all came together with the creation of the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, or CND for short. Interestingly, an interesting fact for you, this was largely created and founded by women who were concerned about the high levels of radioactive strontium-90 in their children's milk that they were drinking. But you know, from that point, it's something which is joined by lots and lots of people around the country. They called for unilateral disarmament, so the disarmament of everything that Britain had. And it was kind of the idea that if Britain did this, then other countries would follow. It's the idea of, you know, you're not going to take your boxing gloves off if everybody else has them on. But the minute that somebody does, the minute that somebody sits down and gets out of the fight, everyone else is able to feel slightly better in following, because the risk is going down. Obviously, following a policy like this is extremely risky, because what if you do dismantle or you know, disarm yourself, and then other countries don't follow? You put yourself in a very vulnerable position. This debate is still going on in politics today. You know, Jeremy Corbyn was quite a vocal speaker for the idea of disarmament, unilateral disarmament, and I guess we'll never know what would have happened if he would have won elections. We don't know what would have happened in that case. But CND, the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament. Right, the bomb also inspires, or the idea of this nuclear bomb also inspires a huge amount of literature, film, and television at this time, so kind of the 50s into the 80s. One of the most famous productions is the satirical film Dr. Strangelove by Stanley Kubrick. Now, satirical means kind of taking the mickey out of, and that's very much what it is. You can look up the trailer online and you see very quickly it's a bit of a Mickey take, really. It stars an actor called Peter Sellers, and it tells the story of an accidental nuclear strike on the USSR by the Americans and the automatic retaliation by the Soviets, ending in a post-nuclear world where everything's destroyed. And it kind of laughs at the absurdity of that situation. You know, this idea of second strike capability, mutually assured destruction. And what is the point of this? You know, we might as well laugh at it, because it's absolutely ridiculous when you think about it. Okay, so this was a really popular satirical film, published kind of laughing at the nuclear crisis almost, and showing that in popular opinion, people found the whole thing, you know, a little bit ridiculous. Right, so I'm going to tie this all up by just talking briefly about the end of the arms race. So I spoke yesterday about how the Cuban Missile Crisis changed things, and kind of brought the world closer to nuclear war, but also signaled kind of that exit from that really heightened time of tension. Because by coming that close to nuclear war, I think it became very real in everyone's minds about how they didn't want that to happen again. So as a result, as I said yesterday, they installed this direct phone line between Washington and Moscow, so the White House and the Kremlin, and they also agreed to a partial test ban treaty on nuclear testing. And here is a picture of Kennedy signing that treaty in Washington, and that treaty kind of becoming real for the first time. And with that, we do see a calming down of the Cold War in terms of the arms race. So the arms race is super important when you look at the Cold War as a whole, because as we know, having first strike capability, having second strike capability raises the threat of nuclear war, raises the tension all the time. And when you write essays about this, you really need to be considering, this is what's the event I've been asked about. Now they're asking me how this caused tensions, so I need to think about what's happening on an arms race stage. Are nuclear weapons a part of this? Is the threat of mutually assured destruction and the whole world's destruction a part of this? We went through some of those events, the Berlin blockade, the Korean War, Cuban Missile Crisis, where this is really, really, really important, okay? And hopefully that's been interesting for you and everything's kind of clarified about the arms race now.